the clinic that we have going on right now is with Ben Van Treese, and he's going to be covering the ageless athlete, how to rage into old age with joint-based training. So I'm stoked to be able to listen and participate in this with you, Ben. As we get into the presentation today, there are a couple things that everybody should know who's on here. There is a way to interact with Ben and ask questions. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom, the call that you're on, you'll see a place to do chat and then a place for Q&A. We would love it if you would ask any questions through the Q&A, and you can ask those at any time, and it will keep track of those. And then whenever Ben wants to set aside time to, whether it's throughout the presentation or at the very end, then he'll answer those questions. But please feel free to use the Q&A button down at the bottom to ask questions. A quick introduction. I'm Eli Kerr. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Gnarly Nutrition, and I want to just make sure that everybody knows a little bit about who Gnarly Nutrition is. We're a sports nutrition company that provides all natural NSF certified sports nutrition products, really focused on designing nutrition products for athletes and individuals who pay attention to what goes into their bodies. We like to think that we've also made sure that products taste pretty damn good. So the last, it's been about the last 6-8 weeks, we've really been focused on hosting a number of clinics that have all been focused around this idea of longevity in sport, which is really, preventing injuries, dealing with injuries, recovery tips, how to take care of our bodies so that we can keep doing the things that we love into old age and, perform at a level that we want to perform and not be sidelined by sickness and injury, which, is a constant battle for everyone, right? We're down to our last week of clinics. We have 3 more, beginning with this one, and then 2 more consecutively throughout the week. So we'll hope that you'll participate in those other ones as well. During the time that we've been running these clinics, we've launched a new product, Gnarly Collagen Pro, and it was an awesome time to launch this product because it really does support kind of the concepts that we're talking about as far as helping people stay healthy, reducing joint injury, and helping recovery, or really not just joint injury, but soft tissue injuries. So we really encourage you to check out our Gnarly Collagen Pro, and in fact, post this clinic when we send the recording to you. There'll also be a little discount that you can use specifically along with a free gift in that email. Couple of other things, we would love for you to participate in social media as far as this clinic goes. As Ben teaches you something that sticks with you, or that really resonates with you and you want to share with other people, you think as a powerful concept, we hope that you'll screenshot it, or share the thought on social media, tag us and tag Ben. We also hope that at the end of this clinic, you'll get a quick opportunity to give us a little feedback and also provide Ben some feedback. It would be awesome if you just took the little survey that you get as you exit the event today. So with that said, I just remind you that if you have any questions along the way, use the Q&A button down at the bottom. And again, remind you that the clinic we are in right now is the Ageless Athlete, How to Rage into Old Age with Joint-Based Training. And the presenter today is Ben Van Treese. Quick clinic description. Do your joints have the range of motion and strength to support your favorite activities? Can you move each vertebra and the spine independently? Most athletes neglect their joints, so they leave years of performance, good health, and fun on the table. Ben Van Treese, founder of Off the Mountain and the functional range conditioning provider, uses joint-based strength training to turn aging athletes into ageless athletes. Join Ben for a discussion about training for longevity. You'll learn a routine to wake up your joints and discover what it takes to rage into old age. So a little bit about Ben Van Treese, and then I'm going to turn the time over to you, Ben, and I'll sink into the background. I'll stay on to be able to help answer questions and run the questions if you'd like. But I'll turn off my image, and I've given you the capability to run the presentation now. But a little bit of a quick intro to Ben, and then I'll turn the time over to him. Ben is a personal trainer who specializes in developing mobility, muscle control, and longevity in athletes. He's based in Park City, Utah. Ben offers a rare science-based approach to personal training. Over the past decade, Ben has served everyone from Olympians, NBA, NHL, and NCAA players to high school athletes, weekend warriors, and mountain chargers who never let age get in the way of adventure. That's me. Specifically, Ben helps athletes restore joint health, expand active range of motion, increase end range strength. His approach improves athletic performance and significantly reduces the probability and severity of injuries. That's nailing it. Over the years, Ben has specialized in personal training for ageless athletes. People 30 to 80 years old that still want to get after it, but their bodies don't cooperate. He can help you change this. He strives to offer the best private fitness programs by taking a rigorous approach to recovery, injury prevention, and technique. Off the Mountain in Park City, Ben's flagship training program for ageless athletes has helped many people enjoy the mountain lifestyle while feeling pain-free and confident. Ben grew up in a family of professional water skiers. His mother, a national champion several times over, raised Ben around elite coaches. This upbringing fueled Ben's interest in human form and how training can shape the body for performance. Ben earned a BS in human nutrition and exercise physiology from Ohio State University. He's a certified strength and conditioning specialist with the National Strength and Conditioning Association. When Ben isn't training athletes in Park City, Utah, you'll find him rock climbing, mountain biking, and hiking in Utah's outdoor paradise. Ben, super stoked to have you, and there's obviously nobody better to cover this topic than you. So the time is now yours, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Eli. So everybody, thanks for being here. Hopefully you'll learn something today. That intro kind of did a pretty good job of introducing what I have, what I do, kind of my background. And so my goals for today for everyone here is that you understand what the concept of joint-based training is, because that could be a new way of thinking about or a different way to approach training than you've done in the past. And then how you can apply it to your own training and why you should care about your joints, and how starting with the joints when you're building a foundation for strength, for just being able to move around as you get older and being able to play in the mountains or whatever your sport is. If you have joints that work well, you'll be able to play harder, play longer, and then not be in pain. If anyone knows someone that's 40 years old with a really bad back, they're basically an old man because they can't move, they can't play the way they want to. Every time they try to do something fun, they end up in a lot of pain again. So you're kind of as old as your joints are. So that's kind of the point of today's conversation. Please ask questions as I go along. This will be much better and go much better if it's a conversation. So use the chat box, use the Q&A. I expect questions and I'll answer all questions the best of my ability. And if I can't, I'll get you information and I'll find an answer for you. later, and I'll email that to you. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. There's a couple things I want to go over first, and the first thing I want to talk about a little bit is the lenses that we use at Off the Mountain and that I use to view the human form. So the two primary lenses are dynamic systems theory and neuroplasticity. So dynamic systems theory, we've got neuroplasticity. That fits really well in dynamic systems theory. So dynamic systems theory is essentially how can you look at a system of systems and understand how it works. So it can be applied to a local government, a local economy. It can be applied to a human. So Eli, he is a system of systems. So like the smallest unit of Eli, you could break it down in a bunch of different ways, but we could start with the cell. That's an individual system. And then that builds out, and then you have a tissue, that's another system, and then you build that out. Now we have the musculoskeletal system, and then you've got central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. So Eli is a system of systems, and they all work together to produce Eli. And for what we're looking at today, we're looking at how you move, how you play, how you train in order to function at the highest level you can. So that's dynamic systems theory. So how can we look at your system and create an environment around your system so that your body functions the way we want it to? That's what we're looking at. Neuroplasticity is all of the tissue in your body is plastic. So we can go from muscles all the way to bones. Those are all plastic, meaning we can change the expression of that tissue. And the biggest difference between a muscle to a tendon to a ligament to cartilage to bone, and you've got everything in between. You've got cardiac tissue, you've got fascial tissue, all of that. That can all be changed in how it functions, the shape of it, how it performs. The biggest difference between from the muscle all the way to the bone is the rate at which we can drive change. So we can drive change in muscles pretty quickly. You can drive change in bones, but it's a much slower process because the rate at which that tissue turns over is a little bit different. So those are kind of two things that we want to think about when we're approaching training the joints, because we want to see what is causing the joint to function the way it is. So when we do our assessments, let's talk about a hip joint first. You've got the socket, you've got the ball of the top of the leg bone, and that's inside the socket. We need that joint to be able to rotate. So internal rotation, external rotation, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. And can it do all those things? And if not, why? Is it coming from soft tissue, so local tissue? Is it coming from some sort of nervous system guarding, so neural guarding? Is it coming from the bones, or is it coming from the capsule? And so once we figure out what's causing the joint to not function the way you want it to, then we can change and create an environment around that joint to either drive that neurological change, drive change in the soft tissue, drive change in the capsule. And if it's bony and like it's bone on bone, then that's not something we can really help with. That's where you're looking at more of kind of a surgery type thing. And so I've got a whiteboard here because I wanted to go over a little bit on how you can directly impact your system and how this can impact how your body feels. So allostatic load, it could be something you're familiar with, something you may not be familiar with, but allostatic load is essentially the overall load on your system. And so the overall amount of stress that your system is handling. And if we can influence the amount of load on the system, we can change the expression of the physical body in terms of how it functions. Stress affects everybody a little bit differently. But when we're using the lens of dynamic systems theory and allostatic load, we can take a human. So let's use Eli for an example. And Eli is a bucket. So if this is the bucket that is Eli, this bucket is full of health. So we've got health all in the bucket. And then what impacts the stock in the system, so the amount of health in Eli's system, is we can add health into the system And we can get that through diet, so nutrition. We can get that through working out for recovery. We can get that through better sleep, staying hydrated, all the things we know how to do to help the body recover. And then at the bottom of this system, we have a bunch of faucets. And all of these faucets here pull health out of the system. And so the faucets are stress. So if we have any type of stress affects the amount of health in the system. So it can be financial stress, physical stress from whatever your sport is, from your training, financial stress, emotional stress, family stress. All type of stress impacts the overall system the same way as it reduces health within the system. So why do we care about that is if we are, say we're an athlete, I assume most people on here are, and most of us are working professionals, have a job. We're not professional athletes, so we have a different kind of stress in our lives. So say we've got a really stressful work week. So we've had 5 really high stress days where work was really stressful. We weren't getting enough sleep. Our diet was a little impacted. So the health in this system got reduced quite a bit. So now we're working with a bucket that's below half full. There's some sort of magical line in everyone's system. And for everybody, it's a little bit different, where when health gets below a certain point, your body, your nervous system will start to protect itself. So if we have a really stressful work week, and we haven't ate well, we haven't done that, whatever it is, and then Friday, as soon as we get done with work, we want to go out for a really hard ride, a really hard trail run, or hit the gym really hard. That is when you're most susceptible and most likely to hurt yourself because we've taken a bunch of health out of the system, and then we're going to add a really heavy physical load by going for a rager. That's where you'll throw your back out, you'll tweak your knee, you'll hurt some sort of tissue, and it's not necessarily because you did anything that the body couldn't handle. It's that the amount of health in your system was low enough that your system said, "Stop it, man," and made something go out to get you to stop. So you've got to sit down. So you have to rest and recover so that we can use diet, working out for recovery, nutrition, sleep to add health back in that bucket. So I think that's a really important concept to keep in mind. And I like talking to that with all like working athletes or people that are active that work, because one of the most common things I see in the gym is people that are working professionals. They have a really stressful day, so they go hit the gym as hard as they can, they go hit the mountain as hard as they can, and they hurt themselves. So a better strategy is, if you have a really hard day or a really hard week, would be learn how to work out for recovery, which we'll talk about a little bit about today. And so say you get done with your hard day, you go for like a zone 2 run, a zone 2 ride, you do some mobility work to add health back in your bucket, get a good night's rest, and then the next day go out for your rager. And that's a much more sustainable, realistic way to keep your body working well as you kind of go about things. There's a couple chats that came up, so I'm going to check those real quick. So Carl asks, what part does inflammation play in range of motion? That it can play like a large role. So you can have chronic inflammation. That's a totally different thing that I'm probably not the best person to talk about. If you have chronic inflammation, that can be autoimmune, that can be diet, that can be lack of sleep, that can be so many different things. So that's something that you want to definitely look at. But if you've ever tweaked your back or tweaked the hip or tweaked the knee, and then it kind of swells up a little bit, your range of motion immediately in that will be much reduced. And if you know how to train just the joint, so we can do, we know how to regress movement across that joint. So say it's the knee joint, we can take the knee, unload it, and then start to learn how to be able to just rotate the knee so nothing else is moving. So we can start to rotate the knee, take it through a full range of motion without pain and without heavy loading. That'll start to drive inflammation out of that. And then as we drive that inflammation out, we can continue to train that tissue around the knee, around the hip, around the back. And so, yeah, if there is an acute injury, there will be inflammation, and that will directly impact mobility in a negative way. But it also helps things to heal. So Carl, thank you for that question. If anything else comes up, just give me a shout through there. So that's allostatic load. That's a bucket analogy. Main takeaway there is if your bucket's low on health, don't go for a rager. Learn how to train for recovery to put health back in your bucket, and then go for your rager the next day or a day after that. So just kind of work your physical week around your life, and that is a better way to be successful and not hurt yourself often. So joint-based training is we are the sum of our parts. So we want to look at all the major joints of the body and see what range of motion do you have. So we talked about the hip a little bit already. With the hip, we need internal rotation of the hip, external rotation of the hip, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. Those are all things that like a ball and socket joint does. And so when we're looking at the hip, we can look at your activity. So let's say you're a snow skier. How much range of motion do you need in that hip in all of those different qualities? So internal rotation, external rotation, flexion, extension, all of that in order to perform your sport and not damage the hip at all. So we can look at snow skiing, like you probably need, because you can measure joint angles, you probably need about 30 degrees of internal rotation of the hip, 55, 60 degrees of external rotation. Flexion, it's dependent. Are you hucking 30-foot cliffs? If so, we probably need 145, 155 degrees of hip flexion. Extension, you need 10. If you're riding groomers, you probably need less flexion. So probably get away with 115, 120 degrees of hip flexion. So we can look at your event. What do you do? What range of motion does that joint need to have? And then figure out how to make sure you have that range of motion, you can control that range of motion, and you're strong in that range of motion. And that's a recipe for making it harder to hurt yourself. So we kind of go through your event, we go through your system, all the major joints in the body, and do you have the prereqs to do this and not damage your joints while you're doing it? So that's kind of what we're looking at. When we're looking at the health of a joint, so let's stay with the hip just because it's an easy example, and we can get into other joints as well. The qualities we need, first we need awareness, then you need control, then you need to be able to move it, then you make it strong, then you make it fast. So that's kind of the continuum. So for everyone at home, let me move this out of the way real quick. If you stand up, and if we're talking about awareness of tissue and awareness of joints, so if you're standing, and then just reach up and touch your chest right there. And so awareness of the chest, can you stand here, not move anything else in the body, and just flex your pec? So under your hand, you should be able to flex that without moving around quite a bit. And that's good awareness of the system. So touch the chest. Can you just flex that right pec, left pec, whatever you're doing, without moving the shoulder, without doing that? And then you can even reach down under and find your lat. So you're back in here, and then without moving, can you flex just your lat? So that's awareness of that tissue. And so that's up in the shoulder joint. So the pec, that comes across the shoulder. Is there awareness and control of the pec? Is there awareness and control of the lat? Or does there have to be movement to get that to work? So if we have better awareness, we can have better control. The continuum that we really care about for our athletes is you can't move what you can't move, and tissue that doesn't move hurts. So move it. And then once we can move it, we make it strong. And then once you make it strong, make it fast. And that's kind of the cycle that you want to be in. I don't know if you guys can read that or not. Um, so first thing, if we're looking at a hip, we can check internal rotation just by either sitting in a chair with your feet off the ground or just lying flat on your back with your one leg up. So if I'm right here, my knee is directly over top of my hip. And then internal rotation is we're talking about what way does the ball move in the socket? How far can you rotate internally? So the foot goes away from the midline and then you come back. That's internal rotation. Just to do human stuff well, you need about 30 degrees of hip internal rotation. And as you do that, your side shouldn't move at all. So the side of your body should stay still, rotate out. You should be able to find this stuff right out here. So that's just one example of hip and being able to control that. If you can't get that out or it cramps really bad when you do it, that's just poor control, poor awareness, and we want to make that better. And we're going to go over some drills at the end of today's clinic just to kind of get you guys started on what that looks like. And if everybody could stand up, and then when you're standing there, you should be able to find the top of the ball. So you've got your upper leg bone, that's your femur. There's a bony part down here. That's the ball. And then you can find the very top of your hip. It's kind of somewhere up here, maybe a little bit lower than your belly button. So you've got the ball, you've got the bony part of the hip. And then if you move in between those 2 points, there's squishiness. Some have more squishiness, some have less squishiness. Now, good awareness of the hip without moving anything. Can you flex just that squishy part? Can you make it tight? So flex that, relax that, flex that, relax that. You should be able to control that stuff. If you can't control it here when you're standing in your living room or wherever you're at, so you definitely can't use it well when you're doing cool stuff in the mountains or when you're training. Same stuff on the hip flexor. Can you just stand here, find your hip flexor, let it relax, and then just flex it? That's good awareness. First, you have to be able to move it, then you make it strong, then you make it fast. And so why we care about this is the more control you have over the tissue around the joint, the better you can control the joint. So that when you're training, say you're doing squats, now you have access to more stuff in the hips. So you're going to be stronger, you're going to be more coordinated, you're going to have faster response times. Once you're strong, then you can make it fast because all that tissue communicates into the system really well. So the system needs to be able to communicate with the stuff, and that's how it moves quickly and moves well. And the stuff needs to be able to communicate into the system so that all the movements are coordinated. So that's what we're looking at when we're talking about joint training just a little bit. Another like little example of this that I want to go over with you guys is if you've ever done cat cow, we have like 23 or 24 joints in the spine. It kind of depends on how you count. Major joints that you can move. You actually have more than 300, but when we're looking at ones that you can really directly control, and you need to be able to access each one of those joints. A lot of people have low back pain. A lot of cyclists, trail runners, just pretty much everybody at some point in your life will experience low back pain. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your back. But when people come in with low back pain or any sort of back pain, the first thing we do is see how well can you control your back. So what I want everybody to try is when you're on your hands and knees like you're about to do cat cow, you want to go all the way into cat. So your tailbone's under, head's under, and then don't push away from the ground with your shoulders. Leave your shoulders out of this. So push away as far as you can, pull yourself close as you can to the ground, and then just kind of find that neutral spot. Round everything as much as you can, and then try to picture from your tailbone to your belly button and just take that into cow. So tailbone rolls up, and then trying to move one vertebra at a time into extension or cow to the belly button. And then from the belly button, we're going to move one at a time to the base of the shoulders, moving into cow. And then from the base of the shoulders, we're going to roll up through the top of the head. Now we're all the way into cow. And now we're going to take the tailbone to belly button, roll that back into cat, belly button to the base of the shoulders into cat, and then base of the shoulders up to the top of the head. So learning to control the spine. Tissue that doesn't move hurts. And a good example of that is if you've ever been in the car for 8 hours, if you've ever flown across the Pacific or across the Atlantic, long flights, anything like that, when you're sitting for like 8 to 12 hours, when you get up, you don't feel that good. Your hips are achy, your back might ache a bit, your shoulders and neck might be a little bit stiff. After that flight, there's no damage to any of the tissue. It's just tissue that doesn't move hurts. So we want to learn how to control and move all of our tissue. A lot of people we find when they come in and they try to move their low back, they get all their motion above that. And this doesn't move at all. And so we teach them how to start to move this, and then things start to feel better. If you can use and disperse forces across those 23 or 24 joints in the spine, we're much less likely to get any sort of overuse injuries and like herniate a disc, because we're dispersing the force across 23 joints instead of dispersing the force across one or two joints. So the more of the spine we can get to move and to control, the better everything works. So that's just kind of part of that awareness and move it. And then once you can move it, then we train it, we make it strong. Then once you make it strong, you make it fast. There's a question. So this is from John. Is the concept you just covered, can tracking variable heart rate differentiate? Yeah, totally. So using HRV or heart rate variability before a rager, that's a really good guide and a really good metric that you can get on allostatic load. So you can use like a Whoop band. There's the Aura ring. There's the Morpheus strap. I think Garmin does it. I think Sun too. There's so many options for that, but they're all good. They all use a different algorithm, so the number that it puts out is different. But tracking HRV, and then if your HRV changes a whole lot, that means there's a lot of stress on your system. And then you'll want to wait until that levels back out, and then that's a good time to go for a rager. So if you wake up and your HRV's a little bit low or it went really high, it just moved a whole bunch, that's when you'll want to kind of do a recovery workout, dial in that nutrition, dial in the sleep. And then when that levels out, that's when it's a good time to go for your rager. That a lot of professional athletes have been doing that for a long time, and a lot of just less common folk are starting to use it a lot now. So that's really good. That's a really good question, John. Thank you. And if any other questions come up, just shout, guys. And so as we're going through this, we want to, once we get the awareness, then we're going to start to make it strong. Then we're going to start to make it fast. And the mechanism of all injuries to a joint is the same. The amount of force that went into the joint exceeded that joint's capacity to handle the force. An example of that, another example of joint-based training is with my professional basketball players. I used to work with a lot of them. So all of them, we are at some point going to damage an ankle because they're going to go for a rebound, they'll come down, and then they'll roll out. And they're all pretty heavy dudes. And if they land like this, they're going to hurt their ankle in some fashion. So the amount of force that this tissue on the outside of the ankle can handle, if we increase that, we can mitigate that injury. So instead of exploding the ankle, needing surgery, being out for the rest of the season, maybe we can get the force capacity of that like outside stuff of the ankle high enough that they only strain it and they're good to go in 2 to 3 weeks. So an example of what that looks like is I'd start all those guys with just step over. So we'd roll to the outside of the foot, step over. And then once they got that, then we would do that holding weights in your hands and then do step overs. So that increases that. And then we'd get to the point with all of them where you would, with at least like a 50 to 100-pound goblet squat, squatting on the outside of the ankles. And so that's where we started with move it. Now we're loading it to make it strong. And then to make it fast, you'd actually kind of do some jogging on the outside of the ankle there. And you have to build up. If you start with the jogging on the outside of your ankles, you'll most likely sprain your ankle. and get a serious injury. But if you start with, you can move it so the joint can hit that range, and then you start to load it. So now the capacity of that tissue to handle force is increased, and then you make it fast. That's a really good strategy for making really bulletproof ankles. For the mountain athlete folks, it's really strong. For climbers, if you're crack climbing, I recommend training the outside of your ankles. If you're a trail runner, I really recommend training the outside of your ankles. Most trail runners at some point have been sidelined because they hit a rock weird and it moved, and then they rolled their ankle, and then that creates some issues. So the stronger the outside stuff of your ankles are, the harder they are to hurt. So that's just an example of all that. Moving the body through a full range of motion, so moving each joint through a full range of motion, creates an environment where that joint will continue to work well. So we all have like older people in our lives who can no longer like squat down and stand back up. That's pretty common. I think everybody's probably heard somebody at one point say like, oh, just enjoy that while you can, because when you're my age, you won't be able to do that. That's not necessarily true. Joints don't wear down because they got old. Joints wear down because they were either abused, not used, or there was some sort of acute injury to them. So abused would be if you're always just going hard all the time and never working out with joints in mind. So if you think back probably to like, I'm 31, so like my parents' generation, a good training program for them was squat, deadlift, bench press, overhead press. Maybe some people would do some cleans, maybe some people would do some pull-ups. So all of that is in a single plane. And if we're looking at a shoulder joint, you've got your press, you've got your pull. But what's a shoulder need to be able to do? It's a ball and socket joint. Internally rotate, externally rotate, flex, extend, abduct, adduct. So for a shoulder, what a shoulder needs to be able to do is, if we're standing here, we should be able to rotate, come out, come up as high as we can, rotate that behind us, coming all the way down. So that's an expression of what a shoulder needs to be able to do. And the use it or lose it principle is a very real thing. So if you're not using that shoulder in this full range often, we'll start to lose access to the ranges that we don't spend time in. So a lot of people, not that many people, let's go with climbing. If you're climbing, most climbers don't get hurt when they're doing this stuff here. They're going to get hurt when they have to do a really hard Gaston and now they're back here. So when's the last time most people train their shoulder in this position? So the shoulder needs to be able to do all of these things back here with load, especially if you're climbing and making a really aggressive move out here. So if you're a climber, this is a position you're likely to be injured in. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to teach you how to train that shoulder joint back here so that you'll be stronger there, and then you're harder to hurt there. And in just a couple minutes, I'm going to take you guys through CARs. That's a shoulder CAR. And if you do CARs daily, it creates an environment where your system organizes the tissue in the joint to be able to do that. Because you won't lose the ability to be back here and be strong just because you got older. You'll lose it because you stopped training back here. The other thing that CARs do is it gives you really good control and really good awareness of the stuff around the joints. And so your system can control that better. The better the system can control it, the better we can use it. So that's kind of that point right there. I got a couple of questions here I want to go through. That's what's up, Kelly. Yeah, so with the ankle thing, if you're recovering from ankle injuries as a trail runner, start with not what I just showed you. You would want to start with your ankle like against the wall here. So yeah, you can see that. So with my ankle, trying to keep my foot flat. So I'm just going to spend some time here. And then I'm going to take the outside of my foot and try to push it through the wall to start to stress all this. So I don't have to handle body weight there. That's a good starting point. Don't start standing on it and then jumping on it and squatting on it, but that's your starting point, and slowly move along that continuum. So awareness, control, can you move it, then make it strong, then make it fast. That's like super important with that. And then I got another question. Ken had a meniscus tear when he was 50, had it trimmed off, still very active, badass dude. Only doing half Ironmans. Dude, that's awesome. Maintaining the knee joint, not to inflame the knee. Yeah, so that was something I was going to get to. Let's just do that right now. So everybody, if you can, you're either sitting in a chair or sitting on the ground. Let's go through knee cars. So cars are controlled articular rotations. And Dr. Andrea Spina is the guy who coined the term. I've got just over 150 members of my gym, and we mostly do semi-private personal training. If you were to spend a day in my gym, as soon as people walk in, literally every single one of them goes through their daily cars. It's something that everyone should do every day for the rest of your life, and your body will function at a higher level than if you didn't. So if you have one takeaway from what I'm talking about today, do your daily cars. I'm going to be sending everybody a video. It's like 16 minutes long of me kind of cueing through the full body for daily cars with the coaching cues and how to do it. And the only guarantee I ever give anybody with training is if you do cars with intent every day for the rest of your life, your body will work better. Past that, there's too many variables. So everybody, take your right arm and hook it underneath your right knee, and then pull your right toes up towards your knee. If you can, grab your left bicep, and then you're kind of rear naked choking the back of your knee. If you can't get into this position, just grab your hands like this. The goal is to keep your upper leg perfectly still, pull your toes up towards your knee, and then can we rotate? So notice, as I rotate here, my ankle is not changing shape at all. What is moving is just the shin bone. So my ankle relative to my shin stays the same, but I'm rotating the tib fib at the base of the knee. This is super important. So the knee is a hinge joint. If a knee doesn't extend, it can't do anything well. So you want to have extension for sure. We also need knee flexion, but an overlooked piece of training. And while I personally believe a lot of people blow out ACLs when they're snow skiing, when they're trail running, when they're playing soccer, is because we don't train knees rotationally enough. So if we're down in here, this is really good for most people. You should never get sharp pains when you do this. If you do, we need to modify how you do it. But you should be able to, once you pick up the foot, so get your foot off the ground, we're choking out that leg, or we're here, toes pulled up, drive the heel in, drive the heel out. And if you're looking at the top of your knee, you should see these two bones right here rotating and the upper leg not moving at all. And now let's go through a couple knee cars. So squeeze your belly, 5 out of 10. So half as hard as you could. Squeeze your butt cheek, 5 out of 10, half as hard as you could. Flex your quad, 5 out of 10, half as hard as you could. Hamstring, shin, calf. So we want tension. Doing this without tension is no good. You have to have tension to connect the stuff, so the tissue to the system and the system to the stuff. And then we get a good training response. So drive the heel in, drive the heel out. We're squeezing the belly and then every muscle in this whole leg. Drive the heel in, kick that foot up as high as you can. Once it's as high as you can, drive the heel out. Use your hamstring, pull down while still driving your heel out. And if we did a good job, we're going to drive the heel across and in, and there'll be a big rotation through the knee. Kick it up as high as you can, out as far as you can. Use your hamstring, pull it all down. In, up, out, down, pause there. So now our foot's kicked out, kick it right back up. Drive the heel in, that's a rotation from the knee. Keep driving the heel in as your hamstring pulls it all down. Out, up, in, down, out, up, and down. So that's a knee car. Everybody that comes into me that has any sort of knee history or knee issues, we do knee cars daily. And then that's just step one of several of how you can get more rotation through that knee. But if a knee doesn't rotate, it doesn't work the way it should. Hopefully that answered your question, Ken. And so I want to take you guys through a couple more of the daily cars. I think that's probably some of the best use of our time. So everybody go ahead, stand up if you can, and we're gonna roll through kind of some of the basic of daily cars. So first things first, when you do cars, you have to do it with tension. If you don't have tension in your system when you're doing cars, we're only affecting the tissue without the system joining the party. So tension is what gets your system. When we talk about system, we're talking about central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system. Those are the main ones. So the system needs to interact with the stuff. And the way it does that is through tension. So doing movements without tension is not going to drive the type of change and the type of control that we want. So first thing first, let's go through tension building. So everybody make a fist and pretend there's a baby bird in your hands. Don't kill the baby bird. So that's 0. So you just got your hands closed. You're not killing that baby bird. And now take the baby bird out of your hands because we don't want to kill them. And now squeeze your hands at 25%. So it's just a little bit of a squeeze. Now ramp that up to a 50% squeeze through the fists, through the hands. As you get to 50%, you should notice like now we're starting to use some of these muscles up here a little bit more. Now ramp that up to 75%. So it should be a noticeable increase. We're not as hard as we can with our flex, but it's pretty hard. And now maybe you're starting to come up in here and start to feel your biceps, your triceps a little more. And now squeeze everything as hard as you possibly can to make that fist. That's 100%. If your arms aren't shaking a little bit, you're not flexing at 100%. And now dial that back 75%. Now 50%. Now 25%. Back to baby bird. So for today, we want to be at 50% tension through the whole system. And I'm going to cue you through that. So let's start. We're going to start with doing some shoulder stuff. So everybody put your hands on your belly. Take a really deep breath. Belly fills up first. And then blow it all out. Feel your belly get tight. Keep it tight. That should be squeezed at 5 out of 10. 50% squeeze. Now keep breathing. Squeeze both butt cheeks, 5 out of 10. Belly's tight, butt's tight. Squeeze both quads, 5 out of 10. Find your hamstrings. Squeeze your hamstrings, 5 out of 10. Flex your shins, 5 out of 10. Find your calves. Flex your calves, 5 out of 10. Find your toes. Grab the ground with all 10 toes, 5 out of 10. So now we're 5 out of 50% tension, 5 out of 10 through the belly, the butt, the quads, the hamstrings, shins, calves, feet. And now make a fist with both arms, 5 out of 10. So you're flexing your arms. Flex your chest, 5 out of 10. Flex your back, 5 out of 10. So now from the top of the shoulder down through the toes, we're at a 50% tension. Take your right arm and bring it straight up in front of you. So important, I want you to pretend you have a pencil sticking out of your shoulder, and we're trying to draw a really big circle on the wall beside us. Don't let the elbow bend. Don't let your neck move. Don't let your chest move. The only thing that's moving is this shoulder. Push that shoulder forward as far as you can. Double check, how's our tension? Belly, booty, legs, all the things. Bring that shoulder up as high as you can. Drive it back as far as you can. Push it down as far as you can. So how's our tension? Belly's tight, booty's tight, quads, hamstrings, chest back, forward, up, back, down. Double check that your elbow's not moving. If you find your elbows bending as we do this, that's coupling. We need to teach the system where the shoulder is, so that can't move. So if you need to, touch the bottom of the elbow, forward, up, back, down, forward, up, back, down, and now reverse it, go the other way, up, forward, down, back. And the only thing that should be moving is that big shoulder movement, your scapula. So this is scapular cars, learning to take the scapula through a full range of motion under tension without anything else joining that party. So just for the shoulder example, if you can do that well, that's awesome. That means you probably have good access, good control to that shoulder. And you can probably use all the things around that shoulder well when you're doing something cool, whether it's training, whether it's doing your sport. If you're having trouble getting that to do a circle and it's just kind of going forward and backs, or your neck's moving around, or your elbow's bending, that means you don't really have good awareness or good control of that shoulder. And it means you're definitely not using the stuff around the shoulder as well as you could when you're doing something cool. Because right now we're standing in your living room. When you're on the mountain, playing basketball, riding your bike, whatever it is, you're definitely not using that shoulder as well as you could. So everybody dial back your tension. We're gonna go back into it. Now we're gonna do that same shoulder, but we're gonna do a big shoulder car. So GH cars. Deep breath, blow out. Find that tension, belly, booty, quads, hamstrings, shins, calves, feet. Flex your chest, flex your arms, flex your back. And now take that right hand and rotate out as far as you can. Find some tension in the back of that shoulder there. Don't let your chest move at all. We're coming across the body and bringing that arm straight up till our biceps by our ear. Arms still straight, chest hasn't moved. Now take your palm and show the palm behind you. So you're rotating from the shoulder, try to show the palm behind you. Don't let this move at all. And you're gonna swim back, get your palm to face the ceiling, double check your tension, belly, booty, legs, all the things. And now bring that hand all the way down by your side, palms facing out, pinkies forward, thumbs back. Now reverse it, put the palm on the ceiling, rotate 180 degrees, palm goes back towards the ceiling, up over the top, bicep kisses the ear, all the way back down. So that's a shoulder car. When you're doing cars, you never want to push through pinching, poking, stabbing. So if I'm coming up here and starts to pinch my shoulder when I get high, what I'm going to do is just come up to here and stop before I get a pinch, move around the pinch, and then finish out the movement. So never push through pain when you're doing cars. That's a negative input into the system, which will get a negative response. If we adjust that, avoid the pinch point, and go through, that's a positive input into the system, we'll get a positive response. So never push through negatives, especially when you're training and especially when you're doing cars. I want to show you guys, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Cool, we got 10 minutes still. So I want to show you guys spine cars. This one's really big, really important. So for this, everybody stand in a pretty wide stance. So wide enough that you feel a little bit of stretch here. And then same deal, exhale, find that tension in your belly, squeeze both butt cheeks, quads, hamstrings, shins, calves, feet. Give yourself a hug, flex your chest and flex your back. And now the point here is we're standing in cement all the way up to the top of our hip bones. So hips can't move forward and backwards. They can't rotate. They can't move side to side. This is only coming from your spine. So tuck your chin and then roll the spine down to create a C shape as far as you can without your hips moving backwards. And now find the bony parts of the front of your hips if you can, touch those. Pretend there's eyeballs right there in the front of those hips. Keep those eyeballs in your hips staring straight forward. We're gonna take the spine and rotate to the left as far as we can without the eyeballs in our hips moving. So it's all just the spine. Double check your tension. Where is it? You should be 5 out of 10 everywhere. Now side bend to the left as far as you can. Hips don't move. So it's all coming from the spine. And now we're going up and back like we're trying to put our shoulders on top of a barrel without our hips moving forward. So straight up and down, big arch in the back. Hips are right where we started. Now, imagine those eyeballs in the bony parts of your hip. Don't let them move and rotate to the right as far as you can. Side bend to the right as far as you can. Don't let those hips move. And then scrape your circle all the way forward. Hips don't move at all. And then roll it back up. So that's a spine car, especially anybody who gets back pain. If you can't do that without your hips joining the party or without moving all around, then you can't control your spine as well as you could. And if you learn to control your spine better, you'll be able to control the forces going through the spine much better when you're doing cool stuff. So that's why we're going to train the joints, is so that you know how to control forces, disperse forces, produce forces when you're in the gym or at home doing these drills, so that when you're out doing something cool, you can do it without irritating stuff. Let's do one more going the other way. So we're still in this wide stance. We got those eyeballs in our hips. Build that tension, 5 out of 10 everywhere. Roll the spine down as far as you can. Hips don't move. Now this time, pretend you're standing in the middle of a glass of wine. We're gonna try to scrape our circles around the inside of that rim of the glass of wine. This time, rotate to the right as far as you can. Same deal. Once you get there, side bend as far as you can to the right. And then up and back like we're going over a barrel with our shoulders. You're straight up and down, big arch in the back. Rotate left, side bend left, scrape that circle all the way back forward, roll it back up. Hips stayed right where they were the whole time. So that's spine cars. Somebody asked a question with cars. This is an awesome question, Brett. Would you recommend pushing through clicking, popping, or just whatever range of motion exists without feedback? So like a popcorn kind of sensation with cars is okay. A snapping, not okay. So if it's just a little bit and it's not painful or not negative, then that's cool. But if it's like a snap or a big pop, like, it's probably not good. So the way you would do that is just make the circle smaller. So if I'm doing this with spine cars and I do a really big car, it's painful. Actually, it's easier to see with the shoulder. So if like that big one gets a snap when I'm going through the shoulder, I'm gonna just make a smaller one, just small enough so I don't experience that snap. But a little bit of popcorn in the neck and in the shoulder, those three is pretty normal. In the hips, it's pretty normal too. Just don't be real aggressive pushing through it. Kind of make your circle a little bit smaller. So we've got a couple minutes left. Last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is passive range of motion versus active range of motion and options. So I think you'll be able to see this. If we're looking at, like, say the spine, we just did that big circle, or the hip. Let's go with the hip. So if we're looking at a hip, actually we just went through, yeah. So if we're looking at passive range of motion versus active range of motion, for you, those of you that are really flexible, so looking at a hip, so we can take a hip through a full circle. We can do hip cars. And if this is your passive range of motion, which is really big, so that's hard to test by yourself. You need somebody else typically to kind of see how big that joint can move, because passive is what that joint can move through without you doing it, with someone else doing it for you. And then your active range of motion, so say we're doing that hip circle, and you can only do a really small circle without pain or without coupling, without getting like your neck, your low back to move, your pelvis to move, something like that. This is the range here, all of this outside of the filled in blue. This is all range that you have access to, but you cannot control. So anytime your hip is in one of these positions, your system knows that it can't control that, and that's a huge stressor on your system. That's a big nozzle in the bottom of your bucket pulling out health. So your body will create neurological tone, neurological tension around that joint. And that joint will not feel good, will not work as well. It's a protective mechanism because your body wants you to stay in this tiny little range that you do have control over, and then you can communicate into the system with your tissue in that small range. So what we want and what we can get through joint-based training by doing cars and some other things is we still have that really big passive range of motion, and then we can get this little circle through training and capture more and more and more of that passive range and turn it into active. So that's usable. Now we've eliminated all of this red. So the only bits that you can't control are just a little bit right on the outside edge of that circle. That's not stressful to your system. And now you have access to all of this tissue all the way through and around that joint. And that's a much stronger joint. That's a joint that's going to last longer and work a lot better. So this small active range of motion can come from a variety of things. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, it can be a neurological thing. It can be a tissue thing. It can be something from the capsule. It can be bony. If it's not, if it's not bony, if it's any of the other three, those can 100% most of the time be addressed through training and by training the joints. So joint-based training is just looking at the qualities of what your joints have. So what ranges can they get into? Look at your events, like what are you doing in training? What are you doing in sport? What ranges do you need for your event, for your training? And then are there any discrepancies? If there are any discrepancies, we should address that. So we need to make sure that your joints, you have control and expression of the qualities that are necessary for your event. And then while you're training, while you're doing your sport, you're not degrading your joints, because joints don't break down because you get old. They break down because you ask them to do things in ranges that they cannot access. And that's, if everybody approaches training with that in mind, then we can adjust what our training looks like so that while we're getting stronger, while we're getting faster, while we're getting more endurance, while we're getting more explosive, we're also creating joints that can get into the ranges that we need them to in order to perform. That's kind of like the biggest takeaway I want you guys to have. I'm going to send you guys all a video of the daily cars. And if you learned nothing else from this little discussion, it would be do cars every day. And in that video, I kind of take you guys through what cars are and the coaching cues and coach you through how to do them. And if you do that, so the way I've organized my life, I wake up, I start the teapot or start making coffee, and then I go through cars from the neck all the way down through the toes. And I do 2 to 5 repetitions of each under about a 5 out of 10 tension. And that's how I start my day every day. And that I've noticed a huge difference in how my body feels and how often I tweak something. I still tweak things occasionally, but when I do, I'm able to access that tissue and I'm able to start to move it in a way that feels good and get out of pain pretty quickly. And before I started doing this type of stuff, I was injured quite often just from kind of training like a dummy. So do your cars every day. And then personally, me and all my athletes, we do cars before you work out and before your event. But instead of a 5 out of 10, we're going to do 1 or 2 reps at a 8, 9 out of 10. And that seems to help people. That it does help people quite a bit. And it also is a really good check-in. So if you're doing your shoulder cars and you're a climber, and as you kind of get through this, you're starting to get a pinch and you're planning on doing a really explosive training session, that's information that you can use to be like, all right, the shoulder's a little bit funky today. I'm going to work on my shoulder. I'm going to climb a little bit lighter and maybe work on technique instead of power. And so I can still train, but I can train without damaging this. And then by doing things to restore the health of that shoulder during that training session, maybe you wake up tomorrow, shoulder feels great. Now you can go do your power workout without damaging it. So just that type of information can be learned by doing your cars every day. And it's a really good way to check in. And it's a really good day to maintain joints and improve joints. So it is 5 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thanks for coming. I'll turn it back over to you, Eli. If anybody has any questions, just type them in, shoot me an email. Eli's going to send you guys my information. And I'm happy to answer any questions I'm capable of, for sure.
Awesome. Ben, thanks so much. I love the whole cars concept. This is new to me. So there's a lot of learning there. And I love the idea of the daily practice. I guess before we close out, is there any other last burning questions that anybody who's still on here wants Ben to answer while you have some FaceTime with him? We'll give a couple minutes to make that happen. If nobody responds, then we'll go ahead and close out.
Cool. Thank you again for having me.
Oh man, it's our pleasure to have you. you know, people are already saying thank you so much for the presentation, and they'll provide some feedback that we'll share with you, of course. And then Ben, the stuff that you want to get out to everybody, if you want us to send that in the email out tomorrow, then let's connect on that. If you want to send that out personally, then you can also do that. So let's just touch base on that, eh?
Cool. Yeah, I'll email you the links.
Perfect. Okay, one question. Are there modified cars for cartilage damaged joints?
Yeah, 100%. Kate, give me a joint and I'll just show you real quick. Knee. Yeah, so that's kind of a normal one. So with like the knee here, if like that full cars that we went through was a little bit fussy, what we would do is just find a range where it doesn't hurt. So if you are bone on bone in the knee, and you're looking at a full knee replacement, that's like its whole thing on its own. So you're not going to damage it by doing this. But if like this, where we're up here and moving it through those big circles is painful, what we would do is just pull down into the ground a little bit, find the hamstring, pull the toes up, and then rotate out as far as you can without pain. Rotate in as far as you can without pain. If you have a torn meniscus and there's clicking in there, that's really not bad, as long as it's not painful. But learning how to control this rotational aspect of the knee is super important for the knee to work well. And if you don't have any of this wouldn't be a car, but we can start to build that by rotate out as far as you can, even if it's not much, like just a little bit. You're going to take, so if it's my right leg, I'm going to take my right arm, block the knee, and then grab across. And then I'm going to try to rotate my foot through my hand and find that stuff in the knee and find the hamstring and hold that. So that's an isometric there. And then we can do the same thing going the other way. Try to rotate out and try to find the knee and do like 3 sets of 10 seconds of that at an intensity that's not painful. And then come back to this, and you should have gained a little bit more access. It's a temporary thing, but if you do that continuously over time, you'll start to get more rotation through there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Ben, thanks so much for being with us again and for sharing your knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for having me, Eli. Everybody be safe. And thanks for joining us. We'll hang out soon, I hope. Join the other clinics. See you, Ben.
Sweet. See ya. Thanks, everybody.